5070 Ti, it's about as fast as a 4080, sometimes a 4080 Super. It costs 50 bucks less technically than the 4070 Ti. It's not gonna be available. The real price is almost $1,000. It's not worth it. All right, so this is gonna be an interesting review today. I'm not gonna actually talk a whole lot about the performance of the card. I got our charts, we're gonna show you that shit. We're gonna give you the TLDRs. We're gonna talk about the actual drama that's happening with this card. Not because drama sells, but because this one is like, just unabashedly like bad. I don't know how else to explain it. The XG2736 and the XG2536 gaming monitors from Viewsonic feature 240Hz default refresh rates, 1 millisecond response time mode, and industry-leading 0.5 millisecond moving picture response time modes that are ideal for gamers demanding a competitive edge. Designed with eSports in mind, these XG monitors feature fully adjustable and low-profile footprint stand for optimal viewing distance that professional gamers demand. To learn more about the XG2736 1440p and XG2536 1080p competitive gaming panels from Viewsonic, follow the link in the description below. I'm gonna try and get through the actual performance review within the first 5 minutes of this video, and then we're gonna talk about everything else. So I'm obviously talking about the RTX 5070 Ti, which MSRP embargoes lifted today. You're gonna see a lot of varying satisfaction amongst reviewers when it comes to this card, because there are, depending on who you ask, there are two very different prices associated with this card. We will finish with that. We are gonna just get to the nuts and bolts, and then the facts, which are the nuts and bolts, and the performance, and then we'll talk about everything else, because all that performance means nothing until you correlate price. Price is the third triangulation data point that makes any of those other numbers matter. For instance, if it had crap performance and it gave you mediocre, gaming in 1080p or whatever, and it cost 20 bucks, okay, that's a good value if it gave you gaming performance at 20 bucks. If it gives you okay performance at $1,000, that's a whole different story. Spoiler alert, these 5070 Ti's are costing $1,000. Moving on. We're gonna talk about performance, power draw, temperature, generational performance, uplift, all the normal outline stuff that I've kind of come up with our revamped testing style. Obviously, once again, huge thanks to GN for helping us revamp our lab, which has literally been going nonstop for a month. So you'll notice that our charts have grown. They're gonna continue to grow. We're gonna go all the way back to 20 series to make sure that we've got as much data that we can make it relevant for people that are looking to upgrade if they're a generation 2, 3, or 4 old, okay? So key specs, it's got 8,960 CUDA cores on the GB203 or Blackwell, obviously. 4070 Ti respectively has 7,680 CUDA cores, and then 3070 Ti has 6,140 CUDA cores. So that's the generational uplift that we're talking about. I only did the calculations between 4070 and 5070. We know 3070 to 4070 is like 80% across the board. Once NVIDIA got back on TSMC and off the 8nm process that Samsung had, performance came up quite a bit. RT cores are running on the 4th gen RT core. There's 70 of them. 60 RT cores, which are 3rd gen, found in the 4070 Ti, and 48 RT cores found in the 3070 Ti, which are 2nd gen. So any of our tests that use RT, that's where you'll see the newer cards really kind of shine, specifically because there's more RT cores and they're faster, smarter, can do the math quicker RT cores. So that's how that works. Tensor cores, again, there's more of them, 280 in the 5070 Ti, which are 5th gen tensor cores versus 4th gen, 240 cores found in the 4070 Ti, and 192 of them found in the 3070 Ti, which are 3rd gen cores. 16 gigabytes of GDDR7, no GDDR7X this time around, which is kind of interesting. Almost every family launch has had X. I'd expected it on the 5090 and 5080. Didn't exist, so maybe there is no X variant this time around. Apparently X not gonna give it to you. 256-bit bus, PCIe Gen 5 obviously, for an effective 896 gigabytes per second of bandwidth. Base clock 2300, boost clock 2452. I didn't do a frequency chart on this one. It boosts right up to about 2800 megahertz depending on the model. Keep in mind, this is the Asus Prime, supposed to be an MSRP model. It's not. No matter what NVIDIA or anyone says, it's not an MSRP model. We'll talk about that today. There is no Founders Edition card for this particular 70 Ti. There was also not a Founders Edition card for the 4070 Ti. There was, however, a Founders Edition card for the 30 series cards. So you're gonna see a good maybe 2 or 3% variance depending on the model that you look at. This is not the OC model. OC models tend to have anywhere between like 50 to maybe 100 megahertz additional boost clock, depending on the cooler design. So you're going to see a lot of variance depending on the models that you're looking at, on how robust the cooler is, what the overall temperatures are, the power limits. They all have their different kind of secret sauces baked in based on the AIB that you buy from. So our tests are run specifically at stock power limit, which is 300 watt TDP, and well, supposed to be on this card. This card actually goes a little higher. We'll talk about that today. So even though it's supposed to be like a reference-ish style, which is what the Prime kind of is now, you'll notice Prime has been around for ASUS on the motherboard side for a long time, denoting it's more of an entry-level product. It's now available on the GPU side. Unfortunately, this is an entry-level product that really wants premium pricing, and we'll talk about that again in a second. So this probably does have a slightly uplifted TDP on this. Unfortunately, because the card is sent by NVIDIA and not ASUS, I don't have a deck specifically for this card, so I don't know what its base TDP is supposed to be. I guess GPU-Z could have probably told me, but I don't care about that. I care about what's actually being drawn through the cable, which is what we measured. Okay, gaming performance, you know what? We'll put the charts on the screen like we typically do, pause the ones you want to look at. I can tell you right now, across the board, either lands just under a 4080, just above a 4080, and under a 4080 Super, and sometimes beats a 4080 Super. It really is just mingling with the 4080 crowd, beating the 4070 Ti Super across the board as it was expected. So realistically, it's a 4070 Ti Super Super, or a 4070 Ti Super, or a 4070 Platinum. I don't know I don't know what to call it anymore. Maybe we have a more precious metal now that NVIDIA can slide in there, since they like to put 4 graphics cards now in between a family of graphics cards. I mean, it does perform right around a 4080 Super, which at the time was a $1,200 card or a $999 card, which never really existed at those prices very often. But the fact that it trades blows with those cards, it's not anything terrible to write home about. It has a $749 MSRP, which is $50 less than the 4070 Ti's MSRP of $799, but we all know those prices are artificial. They don't truly exist, really, at least not for the last several generations, because supply has significantly not kept up with demand, and that's by design. NVIDIA has intentionally kept the amount of inventory out in the market, specifically with 40 series, low. They kind of learned from their lesson with 30 series, where they had too much 3090s and 3080s and 3080 Ti's in the wild. So there was a huge overlap of inventory with previous gen with new gen, making new gen not worth really buying. This time they stopped producing months and months ago on 40 series cards, which means now you're finding, and I looked, 4070 Ti's today costing as much as $1,200 on the used market. It is a complete shit show. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about the percentage of performance uplift. I started talking about price, but that's another whole part of this video. Our average generational uplift across our gaming benchmarks, not the synthetics, is 21.46%. That's kind of right in the generational uplift we tend to see, anywhere between 20 to 25%. The thing is, there's a couple of titles on here pulling up that average, because remember, my average is only among 7 actual gaming titles and 2 synthetics. We don't include the synthetics. Realistically, it'd be a little lower than that. So for instance, Cyberpunk gave me a 30.1% uplift in performance, but our Cyberpunk test is specifically running ray tracing medium at 4K. Actually, let me back up. Our previous generational uplifts we measured at 4K because they were 80 and 90 tier cards. 70 tier cards, I tend to sweet spot 1440. Even though this card is very capable of 4K gaming in most titles, and you can see our titles are like maxed out settings for the most part to try and see what the worst case performance would be like for the card. 1440p gaming, however, this card can do absolutely no problem. So my generational uplift percentages are based on 1440 this time, not 4K. So 30.1% uplift in 1440, more than likely due to the improved 4th gen RT cores. So there's more RT cores. It's a very heavy RT title, and that's kind of what Cyberpunk is at this point. It is an RT benchmark for the most part. But Stalker 2 gave us 16.3% uplift, Avatar 16.7, Horizon Forbidden West 15.8. So you can see in these tests that are more raster, we are definitely seeing only about 15 to 16% performance uplift generation from 4070 Ti to 5070 Ti. Borderlands 3, which is a heavy raster test though, where more CUDA cores the better, no RT or anything in that, 25.6%. And then F1, 20.8. And so, I mean, you can see You've got the 20% in F1, the 24% in Black Myth, and the 30% in Cyberpunk pulling up that average. But really, it's more like a sub 20 if we had more titles to test, I think. That's why guys like Hardware Unboxed that does like, when they do like their 45 titles tested, that gives you a huge sampling to really figure out what those averages are. So definitely go check out the Hardware Unboxed guys if you haven't. They definitely not go the extra mile, they go the extra 10 kilometers. Got to get the measurements correct for them. I don't think they use miles in Australia, but I could be wrong. Temps, 65 degrees across the board. Aftermarket cooler, as you'd expect. Didn't matter if it was Furmark, didn't matter if it was Cyberpunk, it was 65 degrees. The FE card, the 3070 Ti actually hits 80, but that's because this card is a little bit, I mean, the 3070 Ti doesn't have the greatest cooler design. They really erred on the side of acoustics over thermals, and again, stock fan curves. So you can see the 3070 Ti is like way up there, even though it is a lower TDP card. Speaking of TDP though, this is where we started, and I did something a little different this time. I actually took our PMD2 measurement device, which is an inline power meter that real-time measures the power going through the cable itself. But I also added what the software is reporting is being pulled from the PCI Express slot. If you recall, we have an issue right now with the PMD2 riser, which is supposed to allow us to measure PCIe Express power draw. With the Gen 5 cards, it's giving us a problem even if we switch to Gen 4 on the board. So I just took the software reading, which to be honest was 20 watts on the 4070 or 3070, I believe it was. But I just added those to the PMD. So where you're seeing total board power now, there's a difference between graphics power, which is just what the core is drawing, or total board power, which is what everything is drawing, whether it be fans, lighting, VRMs, memory, all of that combined. So the total board power was actually pulling in Furmark over 320 watts at times, bouncing more or less between 315 and 320. So as you can see, that is higher than the 300 watt TDP that the card is advertised to be. Again, could be because the Prime might have a slightly higher baseline TDP than what reference would be. But since we don't have a reference card or an FE card direct from the manufacturer, there's gonna probably be some variance in there, again, based on the AIB or AIC that you go with. Yeah, and also too, that was in 4K, the power draw test. We wanted to load the card up as high as possible. So again, 4K Furmark or 4K Cyberpunk, bouncing anywhere. In Cyberpunk, it actually has lower dips. See, Furmark is a constant, very difficult fuzzy donut to render. So across the board, it's a much more solid line because it's pegged against that power limiter. But in the Cyberpunk, depending on what's being rendered on the scene, things that are particularly happening, there's a lot of variation in a game versus something like a stress test like the Fuzzy Donut and Furmark. You'll see it bounce about 25 watts between 300 and 325. Not terrible, but it is definitely a trend of the 70 series cards getting more power hungry too, considering the fact that we went from 290 up to 300, and as you can see, it's pulling more than 300 now on this. Let's go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. Write your best fat joke down below, I might pin it. Anyway, moving on, price. We showed on Twitter, and I've got a whole price chart on here, we'll talk about this in a second. We showed on Twitter that Micro Center put up its pricing early and shows an available date of February 20th. That is the on-shelf date. These review embargoes today that you're seeing on the 19th are supposed to be for the MSRP models. That means the $750 price point. However, we put a video up already that's actually gone quite popular showing a $900 price tag on this exact card. So I reached out to folks that are also not allowed to give official public statements from any company I'm about to mention. But I can tell you, NVIDIA specifically sent this card, because remember, they don't make a founder's card, because it was an MSRP model. However, what you're gonna notice today is there are folks that were sent this card by Asus. Asus has communicated to their direct seeded reviewers, we were seeded by NVIDIA, the AIBs can also send their own models out to people if they want. Typically, the Founders Edition card would be the day early launch or the embargo lift, or MSRP model, but it's almost always FE if it exists. And then every other card that costs more than that has to wait till the next day. It's the way it's been since 30 series. This same card sent to other reviewers, not by NVIDIA, has to wait till the 20th because Asus has communicated it is not an MSRP model. So to summarize the video I just put live the other day, that $900 is what Micro Center is showing this pricing is. Micro Center does not lift the price. Micro Center is one of the few bastions where you can trust that they are not going to increase the price. They sell them at the suggested retail price given to them by the AIBs. In this instance, it's $899.99 USD. Then I posted that, reached out to NVIDIA and said, WTF, bro, we were told this is a $750 card. We need to know what the price really is. That affects everything regarding our review. And we were told it's a $750 card, it's a $750 card. I don't know why Asus and Micro Center are saying anything different. It's a $750 card. So then Micro Center updated its pricing, I'm assuming through pressure by NVIDIA, because you'll notice that the $750 price is now there with the $899 scratched out. However, a couple hours later, the scratched out $899 is gone. Now it just says $749. But I posted all of this on Twitter showing that the price changed. None of the other models did. The MSIs, the Gigabytes, or any of the other cards, they still show $800, $939, $949, $999, $1,009. They all stayed the same except this one card. So my question was, did Micro Center make a boo-boo? Was the price wrong or whatever? Then I started getting some anonymous messages, and I respect the people that provided me this. So they've asked me not to share who they are, I think for obvious reasons, because this is definitely a big pot stir. They are a reviewer that was sent the card by Asus, and all communication stated not an MSRP card. So what I think happened, and I firmly believe this now, it was a speculation in my price video that the price sent to Micro Center was the real price, and the price told to NVIDIA was the paper price. We suspect it was never intended to launch at $750, and by Micro Center putting up the pricing early, let the cat out of the bag. Normally this is the kind of thing we reviewers find out after the fact. When it goes live prior to on-shelf date, we have to take the word of the people we work with. Those words are becoming less trustworthy, because when stuff like this happens, there's three people involved. Who do we trust? We're talking about Micro Center, we're talking about Asus or the AIB, AIC, any brand, and that's who we have for this one. So I don't know what Gigabyte has been communicating or MSI has been communicating or PNY or Gainword or any other brands. I only have this one to go by, and Asus or NVIDIA's word. The one I trust the most out of all three of those is Micro Center. Okay, I firmly believe Micro Center is just showing the price that's being communicated to them by their vendor suppliers. NVIDIA, I have a feeling, was under the assumption this is a $750 card because that's what was sent to them. It's really a $900 card. So that actually makes this 20% above MSRP at the $900 price point that is on Micro Center. But don't forget, it now shows $750. What we don't know, because I don't have a crystal ball to know the future, is what's gonna happen on the 20th. This video is being filmed obviously prior to that. And I'm curious now if just to appease NVIDIA, the price of $750 was communicated to Micro Center, but then on day one, there's gonna be a switch flip back to $900. That also, the amount of unfairity taking place for reviewers as well, where some of us were given this card and told February 19th and others are told February 20th, presumably on the MSRP and not MSRP communications, we are assuming this card is $900. That is the most believable thing. That makes it the most overpriced, ridiculous thing. There is no one on this planet that should consider buying a 5070 Ti when it encroaches on 4080 super pricing. Unfortunately, 4080 super pricing is like $1,500 plus right now. So you've kind of taken that whole price bracket and just scooched it up a bit. They stayed separated, but everything scooched up. And that's why I talked about in my video, this becoming a rich person's hobby really pisses me off. So I did a little searching. I went all the way back to the GTX 470. So weird to say. That launched in 2010, 15 years ago. I have put together a chart, and we'll just put this on the screen, editing Phil, and just let it sit on screen while I talk about this real quick. You will see two colors here. You will see blue, which is the launch price, and you will see pink, which is inflated for 2020 or corrected for 2025 inflation. So we can see and put it in correlation of what it would cost in today's money back then. Okay, so for instance, the GTX 470 launched at $349 with a corrected price of $508. The same year the 570 launched, it was kind of a late, it was like early 2010 and then late 2010, because that was actually like the end of the era technically. Anyway, the 570 launched at $349, and again the same corrected price at $508. It was the same year. So a whole new tier of card for the same price. Okay, not at $349. That's where the 70 cards should be. That's where they belong, not the 60 series cards. That was the gamer card. This 4070, 5070, can't even say it. 470, 570, 670 were always like, you know what I'm trying to say if you've been around long enough. Anyway, the 670 or the Kepler cards launched at $399, a $50 increase, which a lot of people rolled their eyes at back then going, what the hell, why the $50 increase? $552 in today's money, that came out in 2012. The 770 came out at the same price, $400 in 2013, but because of the next year, it inflates to $544. 970 came out, remember the 4 gigs means 4 gigs era? Hey, it's been a while, right? Anyway, the 970 3.5 gigabyte card was $329, a $70 drop, which made people go, yay, but later it was like, oh, well, it's because I fucked up the memory. But that's $441 in today's money, and that was in 2014. In 2016, Pascal, the golden era of graphics happened, and the TI variants. So moving forward now, I'm comparing TI pricing because it didn't exist prior to that. The TIs only existed in the 60 series cards, which was super odd. But anyway, the 1070 Ti launched at $450. Do you know if this cost $450 today? Do you know what a different video this would be? Now, yes, inflation, yes, tariffs, yes, TSMC price increases across the board for year on year. It's probably impossible for this to ever exist at that price point again. But could you just imagine, just wrap your mind around that for a moment. Because also too, don't be naive and think that the 5070 is gonna be the $550 or whatever it's supposed to be. I forget the price. Phil can put the actual price on the screen. That's $595 in today's money in 2016. The RTX 2070 Ti came out at $499. I'd still take this for $500, right? $499, again, that's about the upper limit a lot of people would spend on a graphics card. But anyway, $631 in today's money. 2018 is when that launched. 3070 Ti, the first card that's actually on our charts, $600. That was a $100 increase gen on gen, making it $702 in today's money, and that was in 2021. I don't need to explain to you what happened in the 30 series and what was going on in 2021 to know why the pricing got so stupid. Also too, that was the first time NVIDIA had switched fabs. They went over to Samsung, which they made an okay card, but Samsung really was behind the 8 ball or behind the curve on the performance that was expected. So NVIDIA went back to TSMC, launching the 4070 Ti in 2023 at $799. Here's the crazy part. Enough inflation has happened since 2023 that we have a correction of $833. That's more than this technically costs in today's money. But again, this launched today at $750. But realistically, if we average out the prices that we're seeing on Micro Center's website, it's $950. So I made this chart. This is the gamer satisfaction per USD or US dollar per launch year. This is a troubling trend, as you can see. This is why I say that this is nothing more than a rich person's hobby. And that really sucks, because if you actually scroll around Reddit or any other PC forums or whatever, there are an awful lot of people saying, fuck it, I'm just gonna get a PS5 Pro and a monitor for cheaper than what one graphics card would cost. Fuck PC gaming. And here's the real reason this is happening. Nothing I say, nothing Steve says, or his apostles, nothing Linus says makes a difference. We don't change anything. Do you know why? This is not where NVIDIA makes its money anymore. It's all AI. And all you need to look at is just since 2010, when I showed you these GPU price inflations and price changes, look at the stock And do you know who NVIDIA is interested in appeasing? It's those people who own that stock. So yes, NVIDIA took a big hit when DeepSeek came out, but it rebounded. It's on the rebound and going back up. And I'm kind of kicking my ass that I didn't buy it when it was down quite a bit. But that's also because I don't play the stocks. It's just way too volatile. So the 5070 Ti, in a nutshell, 5070 Ti, it's about as fast as a 4080, sometimes a 4080 Super. It costs $50 less technically than the 4070 Ti. It's not gonna be available. The real price is almost $1,000. It's not worth it. So anyway, to just sort of conclude here, I just can't imagine, I guess I have to, it's happening, a 70 series card, whether it's a Ti or not, costing nearly $1,000. The Ti models used to be $50 to $100 more maybe. Like if I had the non-Ti versions on there from Pascal forward, you would see about a $50 to $100 difference depending on the model. It's out of control. It's out of control. NVIDIA is not for the gamer anymore. They are for AI profit.
All of this with AI is the house that GeForce built. GeForce enabled AI to reach the masses. And now, AI is coming home to GeForce.
And these are just the bones that were being thrown. So I would also say, hey, 9070 and 9070 XT are coming, NVIDIA or AMD, BSA, but you know what? They've had so many opportunities to be the hero in this. But they're a sheep. They're following NVIDIA's pathway. They're not going against the grain. So I have no hope for that either. 5070 is coming if NVIDIA decides to seed me, but if they don't, I really don't give a fuck.